Good morning. My name is Dr. Ann Lampkin-Williams, and I have the pleasure of serving as Assistant to the Chancellor for Inclusion here at the University of Michigan-Dearborn. I'd like to welcome you to our Chancellor's Issues in Diversity and Social Change lecture series. Today's lecture series is entitled, What Comes Next? DPS in the Next Year and Beyond, a Conversation with Robert Bobb. The University of Michigan-Dearborn takes great pride in fostering an inclusive and intellectually diverse campus. Our university supports the exercise of academic freedom and examination of controversial issues. And we sponsor events that encourage members of Southeast Michigan community to explore important topics from various viewpoints. We thank you for taking time of your schedule to join us today, and we hope that you share our belief in open dialogue in a mutually respectful setting. At this time, I invite the Chancellor of the University of Michigan-Dearborn, Dr. Daniel Little, to provide us with a campus welcome.
Thank you, Ann, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's so great to have you here on the campus of the University of Michigan-Dearborn. Here on the campus, we have a metropolitan vision for our future. We want this campus to be deeply and constructively and positively involved in helping move forward the difficult issues that our region faces. We've got some very concrete things that we're trying to do in those ways, but this is one of them. It is to sponsor important discussions of the issues that are most important in our region. And I think everybody in the room would agree that education, the opportunities, the development, and the futures which are created by the educational system, for better or for ill, are the most important thing we can offer to our children. So the quality of the schools and our ability to move forward in the most difficult times. Mr. Bobb has confronted the most difficult crisis, I'm sure, of any that he's confronted in his life. But to confront that set of issues honestly and constructively and move forward, that's a huge challenge for our region. I am very, very proud to be able to have Mr. Bobb here on the campus today to discuss some of those issues. I also want to extend my thanks to Bankole Thompson for having conceived of this series now 2 years ago. I think it's been a great way of reaching out to our community and engaging with some of these difficult issues. And I would also like to thank Ann Lampkin-Williams, Assistant to the Chancellor for Inclusion, for the excellent work that she is doing in the very short time, 6 months that she's been on the campus. So Ann, thank you very much. But Mr. Bobb, my real appreciation is to you for being able and willing to be involved in today's conversation here on the campus of the University of Michigan-Dearborn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel Little. Thank you very much, Ann Lampkin. Thank you, the theme here at University of Michigan-Dearborn. Thank you, Robert Bobb, for accepting to be here. When I called you, you said you would do this. And I know there's a lot to talk about. Lots of people are anxious. I recognize whatever you say here on this podium is going to be news. But what we wanted to do is to allow a forum where you exchange ideas, where you ask, demand, who sits at the helm of affairs at DPS questions. There's been a lot of conversation around your exit. But let me take you back on a historical excursion. When you first took this job, what was the definition of the job?
Well, the primary definition was to address the financial operations of the Detroit Public Schools. And I might add that once we began to delve into the financial operations, we found that the Detroit Public Schools really, there are four emergencies, not just a financial emergency. There's obviously the financial emergency that we inherited based on legacy deficits over a number of years. In addition, overall, there's an academic emergency because the academic programs weren't aligned. We found that there is really a reading emergency, which is not untypical for Detroit, but is prevalent in other urban cities and school systems. And to some extent, there's a parental involvement and engagement emergency. And so as we address the financial emergency, all of the other emergencies are tied and connected it is very difficult to decouple the financial operations of the school system from the academics, from the fact that we have a deep reading emergency, and also from the fact that there, to a very large extent, there's a parental involvement and engagement emergency. And so we took the approach that it would be very easy to address the financial operations and just cut the school system to the very bare bones. But at the same time, that would be done without any consideration for how children are being educated in the Detroit public schools. And I can give you a case in point. I have served as the president of a school of the Washington, D.C. School Board, as well as president of the Washington, D.C. State Board of Education. So, I've seen it both from as an administrator, as an elected official, as someone who was responsible for both the public schools budget as well as setting policies relative to academics. And so I believe that I brought a holistic view. As someone who is deeply involved and engaged in finances, it would have been very easy to come in and look at the financial operations. At the time I arrived in March of 2009, the stated financial deficit, legacy deficit, was $149.7 million. Shortly after we came on board, determined that the deficit was really $305.5 million. And it would have been very easy to just wipe out that deficit. And had we done so, the Detroit public schools would not, we'd have closed probably half of the schools. We would have to negotiate, significant concessions. All of those things we have done, but at the same time, the school district would look significantly different than it does today.
Was eliminating the deficit, was it not part of your assignment?
Oh yeah, definitely. We've addressed the deficit in many, many ways. For example, we've cut over $500 million out of the operations. If you look at what the departments of the district needed to operate their departments, we cut about $500 million from those requests. We have restructured our labor agreements, wherein significant concessions have been taken. We have outsourced significant parts of our operations at considerable savings. We've conducted over 220 operations and financial audits of the Detroit public schools, looking at ways in which we can strengthen our financial operations, address weaknesses in our cash disbursement systems, etc. We have addressed the issue of waste, fraud, and abuse, which has saved us about $6 million. And so, despite all of those things that we've done, we still have a legacy deficit today of about $327 million, although my first year I reduced the deficit from 305 to 218 million, and now it has gone up for a whole variety of reasons.
Now, you went up to the state to ask for some money, correct?
Well, I never asked the state to write a check to the Detroit Public Schools, and I think that has been one of the kind of the misinformation. When it appears as when you appear on behalf of the Detroit Public Schools, all kinds of interpretation is done. We did not ask the state to write a check to the Detroit Public Schools. Last year, what we said, in Michigan, there are 40, at least last year, there were like 40 or 42 school districts that were in deficit, very similar to Detroit. And so we asked the state to do at the time with the former governor was to securitize part of their tobacco trust fund. And that was the only, we're not experts in the state's financials, but we figured, I've been involved in tobacco trust fund securitizations and other assignments that I've had. And so we said, create a fund, and those deficit school districts could opt in to that fund. And the fund would help with their deficit so long as those school districts were prepared to put in significant education reforms. And so what we said to the state in that regard, if Detroit were to opt in, then don't write us a check, but pay off or make payments on the principal and interest of short-term borrowings that we've undertaken in the past. And as a result, that would help our cash flow.
Let me ask you this question, Mr. Bobb. Looking at the time that you've been here and the assignment that you've been given, would you say you've succeeded, or there's a lot left to be desired?
Well, I think we've succeeded in many ways. I mean, we've learned a lot. I mean, I think, I believe I wasn't an expert on Detroit Public Schools when I came, but I believe I know a lot about the Detroit Public Schools. I think we've succeeded in getting a lot of the rot out of the system. We have to continue in that regard. I think we've succeeded in, we know where the money is. I mean, I can almost tell you where every penny is in the Detroit Public Schools. So I think we've succeeded in that regard. I think we've succeeded in raising the debate on academics. I mean, we have a 5-year academic plan for the Detroit Public Schools. The Detroit Public School system had not made adequate yearly progress since 2006, pursuant to No Child Left Behind. And so I'm happy to report that last year, for the first time since 2006, the Detroit Public Schools made adequate yearly progress as a school system. And I think that's progress on my watch. The academic programs that we've, the academic goals that we've set, I think if those goals are allowed to take hold and have some structure for some long periods of time, that we'll see significant gains in the Detroit Public Schools. For example, we set a goal for the graduation rate for the Detroit Public Schools by 2014-15 to be at 98%. I'm happy.
Was that an ambitious?
Very ambitious. I'm happy to report that in 2006, the Detroit Public School graduation rate was 66%, and it's been declining since 2006. But we will report next year, and the current graduation rate is at 58%. But we'll report next week that the graduation rate is now at 62%. Conversely, in 2006, the dropout rate was at approximately 3% in 2006, and it increased every year. Last year, the dropout rate was 28%. This year, we'll report that the dropout rate is about 19%. And our goal for 2014-15 is for a dropout rate at 3%. We set a goal that every child in Detroit should be reading at grade level or above by the time he or she reaches 3rd grade. The research shows that when a child cannot read at grade level by the time they reach 3rd grade, those are the children who are most likely to drop out of school. And by the way, when they drop out, those are the kids who are most likely to enter the criminal justice system. The research is very clear in that regard. So we've set some very high goals. We have, through our reading corps, on record, we have about 5,000 citizens representing 130-some jurisdictions in the metropolitan area who have volunteered to tutor into Detroit Public Schools, which means that we are providing a tutor for every pre-kindergarten child within the Detroit Public Schools.
From the outside, there are those who say, well, how do you define progress against the backdrop of the legal tussle that you're locked in with the school board?
Well, progress, what you have to do, at least in my opinion, is you have to set very high goals. And the progress in these things aren't going to happen overnight. I mean, you have to set the goals, you have to work those goals, you have to have the discipline and the structure in place. And then you cannot have a school system where every year you're changing school leadership, and those new leaders bring in their own programs. It's confusing to parents, it's confusing to teachers and administrators, but you have to set a goal and you have to stick with it. Of course, we've had our challenges with the school board.
What role do you see the school board playing in the future of DPS?
Well, school board's in charge. I mean, quite frankly, there were these proposals for mayoral control. That's not going to happen. And so, school board is going to be the entity that's going to take the school, as of today, that's going to take the school system to the next level. And of course, we're working with the current leader of the school board, Mr. Adams, to make sure that we put in place transition plans, that we put in place a structure that would allow the school system to move forward under the leadership of the elected school board.
Let me switch the pendulum to Sodexo, the food company that got the recent contract. This is public knowledge. Sodexo is a company that has some serious human rights and civil rights issues. And people have raised the question, why are they coming to DPS?
That's a great question. We have our Inspector General's office review every company that we're outsourcing with and those who are competing. In this case, 10 years ago, this company did have some issues. And so we researched those issues. We're concerned about those issues. We looked at the progress that the company has made since that time. For example, the president of the company, the K-12, is a DPS graduate of Cass Tech. I think his dad was a former publisher of the Chronicle newspaper. His mom still lives in Detroit. The other leaders in the company are also DPS graduates, but they also have won many awards on diversity. Now, for example, if a company gets in trouble on a diversity issue and they do nothing about it, there's no way on God's green earth that I would be involved and engaged with that company. But you look at their diversity program. I had extensive conversation with Alexis Herman, who is the former Secretary of Labor, about the company. She sits on their diversity committee. And so, they've made significant strides.
So Sodexo has redeemed itself.
You know what? I'm not that naive. No company will ever redeem themselves. It's what progress have they made, and what is their, what is the soul of the company's commitment to diversity and to equality for all, and to opening up their corporate structure to do business, not only on the hiring side, but also on the side of working with small and local minority businesses, and they've done well.
Let me take you to Lansing, Michigan. There's a bill currently being pushed that will actually extend the powers of emergency financial managers with far-reaching broad powers. What do you think?
Well, I support the bill. I'm sure you wouldn't have thought I would say anything differently.
Well, one of the conditions in there actually is to ensure...
from the standpoint that, I wish that last year there would have been an amendment to PA 72, which specifically would have dealt with the issue of academics, because I just can't, for the life of me, think of something that we do within the public school system, whereas there's not a financial tie to it. Since we're at the University of Michigan, maybe here on campus someone can give me some clues, but quite frankly, I just can't foresee of what we do where there is not some financial tied to it. And therefore, as an emergency financial manager, we take the position that if a penny touches it, we're responsible.
I understand there's a condition in the legislation that will actually ensure that any elected official who challenges the power of the financial manager may not run for office for a certain period of time.
Well, as a former elected official, I can't support that. And I think the bill has been amended. So that clause has been amended out of the bill. So that was an amendment that was voted, the bill was amended as it was voted out. So there's not the issue of whether or not an elected official can seek office again.
Now, Governor Snyder, there's conversation around your contract either being extended or not renewed and so forth. If your contract is extended by the governor, would you accept, or are you just done with Detroit Public Schools?
I don't like the way you asked that question. Just done. I want everyone to know I don't subscribe to just done with it, right? No, I would, stay on until the end of June. I think there's, you're kind of at the 2-minute drill. So there's a lot of work yet to be done, particularly in putting together a transition plan that would address, both the financial and the academic as well as the organizational structure of the school district. And we're a long ways. I mean, we've done a lot. So even if I left on, March, 1 March, we can still leave a skeletal plan for someone to pick up and move forward with.
Let's get the mic in the audience now, and we'll get you to start asking Mr. Bobb questions. But while we do that, what toll would you say this job has taken on your family? Because we never hear that conversation within the context of running DPS.
Well, let me put it to you this way. 2 things. One, I live in Washington, D.C., and so I'm here most weekends. Detroit is not a very difficult city to fall in love with. I just happen to believe it's a great city, despite, what people say outside about Detroit. I'm one of the big defenders of Detroit, having worked in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and spent my weekends in Detroit, despite the fact that it has, declined in some areas. What I see the trajectory for the city moving in a very positive direction. And the one thing that gives me a lot of strength for being here is the fact that there are so many people who care passionately about the success. And I find more people cheering for Detroit's success than cheering for its failure. It is a challenge on your family when you're here this weekend. For example, I'm here for the next 2 weekends before I go home, and then I'll be back in D.C. for a few days, and then I'm back in Detroit. So it's easier being here than in my consulting practice. My consulting practice literally took me around the world. So I remember the year before coming here, I logged about 155,000 miles, air miles, around the world, not including the number of Amtrak visits, trips up the East Coast. So it's an easier commute by air, 1 hour and 5 minutes versus, you just have to work those things through. I've been married for 37 years, and my family, we've been, we started out here in Kalamazoo. We picked up and moved to Santa Ana, California. We picked up and moved to Richmond, Virginia. We picked up and moved to Oakland, California. We gathered everyone up and we moved to Washington, D.C. And I know all of those moves, we've never moved to a city, but for the few years I was here in Michigan, where we had an extended family. So we've more or less with friends have to kind of forge some friendships. So it does take its toll.
Let's talk about classroom sizes. There's been a lot of school closings at DPS, and people are saying, well, how do you stop the exodus, people moving out of the district? What confidence do you give parents when schools have been closed and you're telling them to stay in the district?
That is a great question. That's a big struggle because on the one hand, you're out retaining. You have this student retention program, and you're sitting on a stoop with the family and trying to convince them to bring their child into Detroit Public Schools. And then, on the other hand, based on both the finances, the size of facilities, you're also closing schools. And so I think for anyone, whether it's an emergency financial manager, school board, superintendent of schools, as they address a school system that at one time in its life cycle had over 200,000 students, and now we have about 76,000 students. We have facilities, where a building was built for, let's say, for the sake of argument, 2,000 students, and you have less than 1,000 students in the building, or you have buildings that were built for 1,100 students, and you have less than 300 students in the building. So something's got to give. But that is, I think the question you just raised is one that it's hard to find the magic that where you're not confusing a parent of a child. I'm going to close the school, but I want you to keep your child in the school system. And so I think by having a very strong academic program and kind of offerings of schools to parents, you can retain students. But it is a very, very difficult question.
Some of the concerns...
And let me just say this too. I would say that if anyone comes to Detroit after I leave and say, we can close the school, we're going to retain all these kids, make them show you your plan, because I just absolutely think that as we close schools, there's going to be a decline in student population, but we have to continue to fight for schools.
Do you reconsider your decision when some of these schools are on the list of closings, and then you find out that in a particular neighborhood, the community is culturally wedded to that school? Do you reconsider?
Oh yeah, who's giving you these questions, man? Sound like you're sitting in some of our meetings. Let me give you a case in point. My first year they gave me a list of schools that were already on the list to close, right? So I went ahead and closed those schools. Second time around, I actually put my city manager's hat on, because we wanted to know what the city's plans were for these neighborhoods before we closed schools. And so we used the city's plan for growth and development in neighborhoods. We walked every neighborhood where there was a school that was on the school closure list. Last year, I think we had 40-some schools, almost 50 schools on the closure list. And, all the schools made their presentation. Then we went out and we had 50 individual meetings, Saturdays and Sundays, with small groups of parents and others. And we took some schools off the list because we wanted to know where the investment was taking place. The other challenge that we have in Detroit is the physical layout of the city. You have all these freeways, and you have these mile streets that are very wide, and then you have some boulevards that are very wide. So you may have a school that should be closed, but the school sits right between a freeway, an industrial park, and something else. And if you close that school, it would be very dangerous for children to go from their neighborhood to another neighborhood, even if you bus them. And so we made some decisions. Of all the schools on the list last year, we only closed 30 schools based on input from parents, based on the city's growth and development. And then next week, as we are currently working on the next series of closing, we're going back to the city, because the mayor's new, I think, 9 growth areas. And we want to make sure that, we're consistent. And I can tell you that in one area where we're building a new school, we're totally out of sync with where the mayor's growth is. I give you another school. So this year, we're going to look at how we can consolidate schools more. And we've had some very successful consolidations last year. I'll give you another case in point to the question you raised. There's a school called Karsten Elementary School, and in the neighborhood where that school is located, the city at one time in its plans were going to build like 20,000, somewhere, yeah, I think like 20,000 residential units, 10 or 20,000. That was a huge number. That never happened. So you had the school, this high-performing school, sitting on an island all by itself. And so it was on the closure list, and I can justify closing that school just based on declining population. It's like less than 300 students in the building, high-performing building, but you close that school, there's nothing left in that neighborhood.
To what extent do you think charter schools have been responsible for the crisis that DPS is in today, or in fact, do we need educational choices to make DPS compete?
Well, I think the charter school movement is here and alive. It's not going away. I would always encourage parents to choose wisely a DPS school or a charter school. I mean, there are charter schools who are performing worse than some of our so-called worst performing schools. And so I would always encourage parents to choose wisely. One of the reasons why I'm a huge supporter of the Excellent Schools Detroit program is the fact that it focuses on children. And so the theme behind that program is that let's be concerned for every child in Detroit, and that those children receive a 21st century education with 21st century teaching, no matter whether that child attends a DPS school, a charter school, a private or parochial school. And then the annual report card that evaluates both charters and private schools, so that parents will know that this DPS school is failing, this charter school is failing, this parochial school is failing as well, so that parents can have a choice. They just issued their report of the top performing schools in the area. 30 plus of those schools were DPS schools. And for the last 3 Saturdays, there were these fairs where parents can come and choose a school for their children. And I'm really happy that 30 plus DPS schools were, part of it. It wasn't just Cast and Renaissance. There were, some of our very high-performing pre-K-8 and pre-K and elementary schools as well.
Governor Snyder proposed his budget cuts and so forth, drastic cuts for funding for public education here. And does that defeat the purpose of moving DPS forward and other school districts?
Yeah, those cuts are going to be tough. I've just done kind of a back-of-the-envelope assessment, and we'll drill down a little bit more deeper in the next few days, but just kind of off the cuff, back of the envelope, it's about $39 million, I believe, for DPS, based on whatever number you use for number of students. So it's going to be a serious cut, but,
Would you ask the governor to reconsider? Well, there's been a conversation that Detroit should be treated as a special case study.
Yeah, we should. I think, look, I don't know that we should be considered as a special case study because, Hamtramck could say the same thing, Pontiac could say the same thing, Flint can say the same thing as well. I think having an urban policy which focuses on, the life and soul of a city, which includes not only our first response services, but our education system. I think it has to be taken into, you have to look at these things holistically. I think the reality, of course, is the fact that, the state has a serious budget issue. Cities and counties have a serious budget issues as well as school districts. And, we all have to, I think we've done a pretty good job of tightening up our belts at DPS. More will have to be done. And so I think we're just dealing with the reality of, where we are at this point in time.
Let's say you're no longer the emergency financial manager, and I walked into you at a restaurant in Washington, D.C. I said, let's have breakfast. And I said, look, give me your honest opinions about DPS and, some of the things that you have to deal with, where you're making politically correct statements. So give me your honest opinion. What would you say?
Why did I agree to this program? That's what I'm going to say. I think there were some things that have really surprised me when I came here. I didn't, anticipate some of the hostility. I did not anticipate, I grew up in the segregated South, and in some instances it's been more difficult being in Detroit than having lived in the segregated South. Just, with some of the threats. You expect some of that. I was Homeland Security Advisor for the District of Columbia government. And I had that many threats as I've had in that role of my personal safety as I've had since I've been in Detroit. So I would say that would have been a surprise. The other surprise that I didn't anticipate, but I heard all of these, these rumors, was the level of corruption. That surprised me. And some of the, I want to choose my words carefully. I don't want to get sued. I had lawyers in the room. In terms of how some of these things are connected, you deal with this person over here, they're connected to that person over here.
A spider web.
Yeah, it's like a real spider web, so you just have to keep going. So that was a surprise. The thing that gives me a lot of energy, though, is, and I see Sherry's out there and a few other teachers are probably out there, is when you're in these schools, man, that gives you a lot of energy. I have to admit that sometimes you're in the high schools and you go like, oh my God, I don't believe these kids. But, it's like yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I started my day at a couple of the elementary schools and, there's little kids. They're just so many children just so eager to learn. And many of these kids come from such tough backgrounds. And, when you have to go to a ceremony and you see little kids and they've learned how to ring these bells and make music and they have their poems and they're singing and they're eager and they're nicely dressed. But then when you dig deeply, these are kids without underwear, they're without boots for the winter, they're without coats. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge when you have, people who are struggling for jobs and their work require them to be at work at 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So they get their kids to school, and then at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, they're taking their kids out when they should be in school for the end of the day. But they don't have that support system because now grandparents are raising kids. I was in one neighborhood where, encouraging these children to stay in DPS. There's a grandparent raising 6 children all by herself, and she's basically tired. She tells you that. And so there's some challenges. And so, I was in a meeting with parents, and they go like, well, what do you want from parents? I only ask parents to do 2 things. Principals ask for a whole bunch of things. I only ask for 2 things. 1, get your child to school every day on time. And then the second one is make sure your child gets a good night's sleep. I was in one classroom where all the other kids are energetic this week, and there was a little guy fast asleep. I wasn't a teacher because I wanted to just take my bottle of water and pour it on the little kid's head, but then I know I've been in real trouble. And it's like, wake this kid up, maybe take him to the office with me for the rest of the day. The other thing that surprised me is that I can't believe people don't bring their children to school on the first day of school. you'd be surprised that on day one, how many kids are not in school on the first day of school. I mean, with one of my sons, you know, it's like school started like on Monday, I would get him to school on Saturday. I ordered him out of my house, you know, get to school. But it's surprising that, you know, how it's like 2 weeks. I was distressed on day one because at the end of the day, on the first day, you want to know how many kids actually showed up. And the number was like 40-some thousand. And like, oh my God, what did we do wrong, right? So these experienced people who've been here for a while, they said, don't worry, they're going to come. And every day, more kids come. 2 weeks later, they're still coming. I was at one school, and a parent was enrolling 3 of her children. It's like, and it's like 2 weeks later, where have your kids been for the last 2 weeks? So that's another, I mean, I think I had some conversations with the president of City Council about this, Charles Pugh, and I think next year there needs to be some really grassroots movement before school opens that encourages parents to bring their children to school on day one, even if they don't have the uniform.
Which is a segue to my next question. You talk about the council president. When you look at the city of Detroit as a whole, do you see a willingness, an embrace, if you will, or a resolve to really get DPS out of the crisis that it's in right now to move forward? Or do you think some people have actually, within the leadership, have given up?
Oh, I've not seen any give up. I've not seen anyone give up. I've not met that person yet. I'm not saying that they're not out there, but I haven't. I mean, the mayor is like very much committed to not only improving the city, but recognizes the fact that improvement of the city involves the improvement of the Detroit public schools. So the mayor is very much involved and engaged with us at every level of his administration, despite the fact that he has some significant challenges. The council president is very much involved with us. I mean, we can call him at any point in time. He and his staff have adopted Frederick Douglass All-Male Academy. They're there on a weekly basis. Members of Hartford Church is also where he's a member. They're out morning and afternoon at our schools. Mr. Brown, who's a member of the City Council, I believe he's the vice president, he has adopted one of our schools as well. So what I found is that at the leadership level of the City Council, we have individuals who are very much involved with DPS schools. Now, others may be as well, but I know of those 2 individuals who are very much, almost have adopted individual schools.
A final question before I move to the audience. There are people who say, look, we've been here for a very long time. We've seen the district, change superintendents like musical chairs. And, we are angry about where the district is in today. And so when we come out to speak out, it's almost a demonstration of righteous indignation and so forth, because we are angry about the district. I guess, where do you place that within the context of, the moving Detroit Public Schools forward? Do you see perhaps a reasoning in that? Do you see that as legitimate discontent when people say, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that?
Well, the people who are really, and I mean this negatively, so don't anyone throw anything at me now. You have a lot of people who really are concerned about Detroit Public School, but they're the majority, but they're the silent majority. And so what you hear a lot from, you hear from those who, whose agenda is not necessarily aligned with let's do what's right. I mean, they'll articulate it, but they want to operationalize it. So you have a lot of people who are very strong supporters, but they're not going to, but they, for one reason or another, they're just not going to be on the front line because, no one wants to, take the verbal abuse and the hits. But you have a lot of people who are very strong supporters. They're kind of in the background. Some of them, there are people you can call on, and they'll say, well, I can help you with this, but don't let anybody know that I'm really helping you. Because they have relationships And you have to understand those things. But there are a lot of people who
They come
care
out.
passionately.
They come out in the middle of the night like Nicodemus, right?
Yeah. He said that.
Let's go to the audience. Who wants to fire the first question to Mr. Bobb? And please tell us who you are. No editorials, no commentaries, just a question.
I have a question. This series is entitled What's Next for DPS, and I was wondering, with there being the challenges around the school board that you're experiencing, would you consider a mayoral takeover of the school district a possibility? And if so, why would you consider that? And if not, why would you not consider that?
Thank you.
Yes, I want to, if I can put some context around my answer, okay? When I ran for the school board president in Washington, D.C., a group of us ran. I ran for school board president. We had a mayor running for mayor. We had people running for the city council, including president of city council. So we all were involved in a very contentious campaign across the city. And, you know, it's like here, you win in the primary, you're okay in November. So when the mayor of D.C., when the individual ran and won the mayoralship, shortly after the primary, he announced the takeover of the school system. And so I was president, I won my election, I became president of the school board while there was this mayoral takeover. And obviously I opposed the mayoral takeover for two reasons. One reason is that when we were running for office, there was no debate on the campaign trail for mayoral takeover or not mayoral takeover. And I thought we should have, that issue should have been debated. And then the second one, I thought that the citizens of the district should have had an opportunity to vote. So I was president of the school board for about 6 or 7 months before the official mayoral takeover. And then I became president of the State Board of Education. But when I look back on it, I can see that there were significant advantages to having one single point of accountability in that particular environment, because our school board meetings were very contentious, and the school board were very contentious, and the student achievement was on a significant decline in the District of Columbia. And so there was, it was almost like a perfect storm for the mayor to take over the school system and have one single accountability. And he said, I will put my political life on the line to take over the school system. So I opposed it. But I would also indicate that if you look at urban school districts across the nation, I believe there's about only maybe 7 in urban areas where there's a mayoral takeover. New York City, Chicago, to some extent Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. The mayor in Los Angeles attempted it, but he was given a series of schools, but there's still a school board in place. So the mayoral takeover is not a panacea for great schools. I mean, there are some of the highest achieving performing school districts in the nation where you have very strong school boards working with a superintendent of schools. And one that comes to mind is Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the high performing, Gwinnett County, Georgia, I believe, is another one. And there are just a lot of school systems. There are more school boards that are running their school system. Having said that, in Detroit, the debate over mayoral control is over. And I just don't think, I mean, you know, you had 37,000 individuals who signed a petition last year to put it on the ballot for November. The city council said no. That ended the conversation. And so I really think at this point, we just need to focus on how do we have strong leadership at the school board level, a good, strong structure going forward.
Next question.
Hi, good morning. My name is Elaine Wilson from the Cody Rouge Community Action Alliance on behalf of Dr. Butler, who's the board president, and Ms. Kenyatta Campbell, who is the executive director. The question I posed to you this morning is, we talked a little bit about the city's growth and development plan. And so I asked the question to you is, what is your position on the House Bill 4214, which relates to a potential state takeover of the city of Detroit, which would definitely have an impact on the school systems and the people who elected those people into office. What is your position as the emergency financial manager for the city of Detroit? And also, just to add, just to follow up on that, if someone was coming into your house to take over your house, what would be your response to that? I'm sure it would not be a roll over and do nothing. So just to comment on both of those, if you don't mind. Thank you so much.
Well, there's a big difference between your personal resident and the city government. So anyone comes into my house, I'm gonna get my shotgun. But, so there's a big difference. I mean, there's just not any comparison in that respect. But there's no, I'm not aware of anything that says someone's gonna come and take over the city of Detroit at all. I think the House bill is out there. It was voted out of the Intergovernmental Committee, Government and Intergovernmental Committee. But you know, if it's enacted and signed by the governor, and that's a big if because it has to make its way through the legislative process, and who knows what that means. But should it be approved, there's nothing. It would be there, but you know, there's nothing that's. I mean, there's a whole process in the bill before an emergency financial manager. And I just think that Mayor Bing and his team, City Council, I mean, those folks, you know, will do whatever it takes so that the city of Detroit will not have an emergency financial manager. And I think they're making I know the mayor and his team, they're making all the right decisions in terms of addressing the city's finances. For the first time in years, they actually filed a comprehensive financial report. I mean, and they have some significant challenges, but they're not, you know, they're not shoving those financial challenges under the rug. So I can't foresee that under Mayor Bing's watch.
Good morning. My name is Rochelle Morgan, and I'm a student here at U of M Dearborn in the Urban and Regional Studies Department. And my question to you this morning is, when you came to Detroit, were there urban areas that you had in mind that you wanted to use well, it's like an example moving forward with Detroit Public Schools. You mentioned Charlotte, you mentioned a county in Georgia as far as being urban areas that are doing well with a school board and a superintendent, but are there urban areas that are doing well, they've had problems in the past and they're moving forward, and maybe you're using them as an example, or is this just, with the holistic research that you're doing here in Detroit, it's tailored for Detroit, the plan that they have?
Yeah, there are other school districts where you have an elected board where the schools are doing really well. Take, for example, the Broad Foundation annually gives $1 million to the highest, best performing urban school district. And I remember Long Beach, California was a Broad winner. Houston, Texas, where you have, these are areas where you have strong school board. Houston, Long Beach, California, and then there are just a host of other school districts. Now there are also school districts where you have very, contentious school boards and graveyard for superintendents as well. Well, they've made progress, but you have to, I just think that progress at a school, in a school system, is made both at the administrative level as well as at the elected school board or appointed school board level, based on the policies that that are put in place and the latitude that school boards give their administrators to manage the school system.
Is it on? Okay, yes, hi. Good morning. My name is Crystal Bonner. I'm a parent of 6 in Detroit Public Schools. 2 graduated. 2007 and 2009. I have 2 in high school in Detroit Public Schools and 2 in middle school. I want to lead off with this. You said not to editorialize, so I'm going to just say this real quick. Music is the voice of God, and art is his majesty illustrated. So why, Mr. Bobb, are you continually laying off and closing down music programs in our school? A lot of times these are motivators for students to continue in school on a regular basis. And my other question is dealing with your debt elimination plan. You have in your plan to increase class sizes. My daughter and 2 of my daughters are having problems in schools because of the increased class sizes. So why in the world would you increase the class sizes from 7th grade through 12th grade to 60-odd something kids with just 1 teacher? Why would you do something like that? That is not going to increase academic success at all. And there's plenty of research done on that. And then my third question is dealing with the VOTEC centers. In your plan, you're talking about closing the VOTEC centers. A lot of our students will not go on to a 4-year university. They rely on these VOTEC centers to build some kind of trade or skill so they can be productive citizens and not go out carjacking people or whatever. Why would you close the VOTEC centers? And then the next question is dealing with the counselors. With the problems going on in our society, kids dropping off of school, and all these problems in our society, why in the world would you decrease counselors? Why don't you utilize the counselors that you have to help these children see through their problems?
So those are 4 questions, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just had to get it in. I can't editorialize, so.
That's the beauty of these. That's the beauty of these forums. Let me take your first question with respect to music. You know, last year in the budget, I cut out all of the accompanists, the piano players, and we put them back in the budget, and that helped increase our deficit. This year we have a similar challenge, and many of those are being put back. Now we've asked the state to help us, let us use our Title I federal funding to hire music and art teachers. But, you know, under state policy, you cannot. So that's the challenge that we have with the state. So it's all about, at the end of the day, it's about finances. I might also add, just to make sure that you understand our commitment to music and art, I created an arts and music district using Detroit School of the Arts as the mothership and using the Duke Ellington School of Music, Spain, one other school on the east, as a feeder into DSA. And we have a relationship with the University of Michigan and a private funder so that those curriculums, those middle schools are aligned with the curriculum at DSA. And right now we're in the process of raising $1 million to support those programs from those schools. The other thing we did, just so that we also secured a grant of $500,000 from private contribution to bring back the citywide band. And that's in progress so that, you know, citizens, kids in Detroit can, again, compete in band competitions at the Rose Bowl Parade, et cetera, as they've done in the past. So, you know, we also, if you read our master education plan, we call for music and art from pre-kindergarten through high school as we build our financial strength of the Detroit Public Schools. So, you know, we're investing in, if a child attended summer school last year in Detroit, we had 38,000 students in summer school, and if you looked at our summer school curriculum, you had a heavy dose of reading and mathematics in the morning, and in the afternoon, pre-kindergarten through 8th grade and above, those children received heavy doses of art, music, both the visual and performing arts in the afternoon. So we see that as a very important part. In our deficit elimination plan that we filed with the state, if you read it very carefully, it says that this plan is a draconian plan. But we have to, in order to secure our financing, short-term borrowing, we have to have a deficit elimination plan approved by the state. And it calls for the closure of additional schools. It says in high schools, if the financial operation doesn't improve, we can have as many as 60 kids in a classroom. Now, we don't expect to have that. And if you follow the research says that you should have smaller classrooms, pre-K through 4, and then you up and increase it, and even in high school. Larger class sizes in high school. At the end of the day, it depends on who you put in front of your children, the strength of the teacher in front. With regard to vocational tech, there is no plan to close, but we have 4 vocational technical schools. We are evaluating what's being taught at each one of those schools and how many children are actually participating and in what are they participating. My own view is that they should get business and science in that regular high school and not have to come to a vocational school for business and science. Should not have to come to a vocational school for homeland security type of training. And so, I am currently evaluating all of our vocational tech schools as to whether we need 4 or whether we need 3. Respect to school counselors, we cut out school counselors, we brought school counselors back. I'm evaluating the school counselors, quite frankly, as we speak, because I want to know how many school counselors are actually helping children to move on to colleges and universities. As opposed to, why would I have in one school 5 school counselors, and then when you drill down, the benefit you get from me is that I'm a nerdy numbers guy. So when I drill down and I look at a school where the graduation rate is less than 50%, and I have 5 school counselors in that school, what the hell? Something is going wrong. They're not doing their job. And so what I'm doing is evaluating all of the school counselors. And I might add, we have some outstanding school counselors. I'm also putting college suites in every high school, where a school counselor is in those high schools helping those children to go to colleges and universities. And the college suites will have the connection where not only can students go online and have a conversation with a with a college or university, but there'll be video conferences from a Detroit public school to a college or university anywhere in the United States where they can have a conversation. We also are announcing today where we have an $800,000 grant from Kaplan where for every 11th grader, 5,500 11th graders can receive free ACT online training for 1 year for Kaplan to get those children involved in ACT training. That is being announced today. We also just recently entered into a compact with Wayne County Community College where we have 2,580 students enrolled concurrently in Wayne County Community College. So started February 1st on that program. 11th and 12th grade students are taking courses at Wayne County Community College at the end of their school day, and the professors are on our campus. These students are not being transported to, they don't have to travel across town to Wayne County Community College. And we're supplementing their tuition. Every child is only required to pay $50 to enroll in a college course, and that includes tuition and books.
The next question.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Hunter Harville, past president of the National Alliance of Black School Educators and a former administrator in Detroit. Thank you, Mr. Bobb, for right-sizing. I think you've done something with that probably needed to have been done a long time ago. The achievement gains, reading courts, all that's awesome. Here's what I want to know. What's next in terms of the criteria for the superintendent, the chief academic officer, all of those things that you are talking about, and how does it align itself with the work that you've already done? because I think this has to be a collaborative journey with you and the school board, and so I want specificity with that. Thank you.
Yeah, school board, President Adams announced, I think, a 25-member search committee for a new school superintendent. We have hired an executive search firm, I believe it's ProAct, to conduct the search for the new superintendent. We expect that person to be on board or to be identified. They say by May 1st, but I think by June, realistically. If it happens sooner, so much for the better, but there's a 25-person search committee appointed by the president. The mayor has agreed to serve on a committee. I will be on a committee along with a number of other community folks. Well, the goal is to, on the search, the key is to hire the superintendent. Now, we also are searching, part of the search is for a chief academic officer, head of special education, and I believe a COO for the school district. And we're only doing that to put in place, have those resumes available. The committee will not vet those candidates, but we'll have a series of candidates available so when a new superintendent is employed, he or she will have a list of candidates that person can choose from, because they're the ones who should be hiring those positions, not the school board. School board should only hire one person, and that's the superintendent. The superintendent then should employ his or her team.
Hi, I'm Marion Brown, Outreach Director for Congressman John Conyers, and my question is around DPS public safety. Recently, you had the grand opening for the command center, $54 million. Shortly after that, we heard on the news about the incident of students being shot over Cartier glasses, I believe it was. And I just wanted to know, what role did the command center, the new command center, have in that, and what impact? Did they identify this, why it was going on? Because it's 24 hours surveillance.
Boy, I really am glad that question came up, because I want to make them give, I think Fox News did everybody a disservice. There was an incident near Cass Technical High School. First of all, there was a championship, there was a basketball game at Cass Tech, very well attended. The basketball game, no problems, ended, people went home. Hour plus later, there were 3 individuals shot, non-DPS students. They were not DPS students, in the vicinity of Cass Technical High School. And if you saw the Fox News, I mean, if a student is shot, I'm told immediately, right? So it's like the next day I hear that there was an incident near Cass Technical High School. In the evening news, it comes on as if the incident involved a DPS student and it was a Cass Tech. There's no reason why they had to feature Cass Technical High School in that newscast. And so I just think, and we didn't sit on our laurels, we went straight at Fox News, because it was a sensationalized lie that it was not a DPS student, nor was it Cass Tech, nor did that incident occur on the campus of Cass Technical High School.
Good morning, Mr. Bobb. I'm Verna Brox. We know each other, and I appreciate always being a part of the solution and not being the problem. However, I understand that this breakfast is special ed driven. But we haven't had much conversation about special ed, and I do want to ask what progress, if any, has been made in terms of transparency within the special ed department and for our special ed students. Has there been a plan at any point to work with full inclusion students as well as the general ed students as they have been mainstreamed together? many of the general ed students do not understand and do not want, along with some of the administration, do not want special ed students at their schools and in their classrooms. So we have asked for the sensitivity training, as well as we've asked for information about the special ed plans, the special ed budget, particularly as it relates to parent involvement. And unfortunately, I think we just haven't gotten the answers. And I have supported many other programs and parades and the Blue Door and all of that, and with my grandchildren. But when the schools start having beat up special ed kids Fridays, we can't seem to get the people of authority to respond, be accountable, or even sit down and have a conversation. So the one question, even though I said all these things, I guess the one appropriate question to ask would be, will you sit down with the special ed parents, help us develop a parent involvement plan and policy, and give us the information about what is your plan, or what was your plan for special ed and DPS?
Yeah, I have a meeting coming up with a team of special ed parents, and then I intend to hold a town hall meeting at Henry Ford High School to hear from the special education community. I mean, I'm very familiar with you and some of the challenges that you have. And so, I mean, special education is one of our top priorities. Before I came here, I was a very strong advocate, as a private citizen with the special needs community in Washington, D.C. I mean, there is a challenge when the state requires that we mainstream special need kids into the regular ed. And so it's a challenge for, not only the students, but it's also parents, for teachers and administrators as well. And so it's just something that we have to constantly, work on. I mean, I was in a classroom this week with where 2 special needs children were mainstreamed into the regular class, and you couldn't tell the difference, other than the fact that the teacher knew that these 2 children had to leave their class to go to for other services within the building itself. So, always happy to meet with the community, and like I said, there's a pre-meeting that I had with a number of parents, and then we'll have a town hall meeting at Henry Ford High School within the next month or so.
Will you meet with the grandparent too? That would be
Well, we want to meet with everyone. We want everyone to be, because there's as there is a division within the community. And so what I don't want to do is get caught in the middle. I want to get everybody together because I don't want to meet with this group and then this group. I want everybody to come together, because at the end of the day, we got to get everyone working on the same page. So happy to have those conversations.
I'll take 3 more questions. We're within time, so we can end this conversation.
Hello, Mr. Bobb. My name is Lee Green, and my question is, after your tenure with DPS, not that I'm rushing you, what type of work do you think you'll do?
What kind of work will I do?
Yeah, after you finish your contract with DPS.
Oh yeah, I have my own consulting practice. So when I leave DPS on Friday, I start on Monday doing something else. I always look forward to returning to Detroit as well. So.
Good morning, Ralston Brown from DSA East Duke Ellington campus. I'm one of the 6 accompanists that was laid off, and it's really created a problem for the children. And my question is, could this have been postponed for a later time, because this is our peak season for our students, and this gives us an opportunity to show our talented students in DPS. And since we can't get media attention, this is one of the things that we love doing, and this is our peak season, so this was a very inopportune time for the accompanists to be laid off. Could this have been done at a later time?
Yeah, that is a great question, because those schools that have notified me that this is the season where the accompanists have been working with students, and now we're into the competition. In some instances, I've made some exception, and so any place where I hear an exception, then I can, where we need to keep where we've been working with children and they're about to enter the state or whatever those competitions are. I've made some exceptions, and so if you just, have your principal or yourself shoot me a little note in terms of what's going on, then we'll make some exceptions. We've done that. I've done that several times. And also, I'm looking for some funding for the continuation of the program through the Detroit Public Schools Foundation as well.
Good morning, Robert, Bob. Thank you for joining the University of Michigan-Dearborn community. It's an honor to have you. I am an AmeriCorps Vista here on campus, and I work with students and try to get them involved in the community more. And I've been encouraging the Detroit Reading Corps. And I was also recently at Osborne High School, and I saw the Detroit Parent Center. And my first question is, have those centers been successful in your opinion? And my second question is about assessment of turnaround school districts. I'm from Philadelphia, and my sister is a public school teacher, and there's a lot of incentive in the short term for teachers to cheat when trying to meet the expectations of the school district. And I was wondering, since you pointed out that attendance is a big issue, it seems like in the short term, it would be a really good idea to judge schools by their attendance rates in the short term, so that if they could have 100% attendance, then the teachers could actually do their job. And then once they actually have their attendance rate up, then judge them on their test scores.
Well, there are very few schools where you're going to get 100% attendance. But you want to get that, you want to get 80, 90, in that 90% range. That's where you want to be. We have performance agreements with the principals, and the part of that is also in those agreements, as I recall, there's also, attendance issues as well, because many of our schools have failed to make adequate yearly progress, not because of the strength of the curriculum, but because of the attendance of children attending the school. So it's a constant struggle to get kids at, for example, this is Count Week. And, we have even, I just had to send out a directive to both principals and, to make sure that the teachers are taking attendance. So attendance is always an issue. With respect to the parent centers, those have been a huge success thus far. And we've expanded. I think we now have 8 parent centers. And then next week, although our students are on winter break, the parent centers are open for parents to come in and learn more about, how they can help their children with homework and some of the other things that are important to connect parents with children. With regard to assessments and turnaround, and we have, there are turnaround schools where they just companies that come in and take over whole schools. We've not used that approach at DPS. What we've done is we have what we call provider partners, where these partners work with the principal and the school to help drive performance at those schools. And these partner contracts are all performance driven. So if they aren't performing, we get rid of them quickly. But we also allow the principals to choose their partner providers as well. And in some instances, they're working out really well. In other instances, we'll be removing some of these partner providers from DPS.
Let's take two final questions, and then we're out of here.
Good morning, Mr. Bobb. I'm John Van Camp from Southwest Solutions. And I'd like, if you could share your views on full-service community schools and how they can play a role in the education of our children in the community.
Community schools?
Full-service, community schools.
I'm not sure I understand what a full-service community is.
Well, the school is the hub of the community, so that concept.
Well, we expect that all of our schools are, to some extent, the kind of the hub of, the community. For example, we're building a new school in Brightmoor neighborhood, new Gompers and Brightmoor. We're consolidating, and so we're hoping that whole community will embrace the school. If you take Laser School, that school is being embraced. Many of our schools are embraced by the entire community. And where you really get a good feel for that is when you put that school on the closure list and you find out how vocal the school, not just the parents who bring their children from long distances to those schools, but the surrounding neighborhood. It's, school is like a fire station in a neighborhood.
Mr. Bobb and to Brother Bankley, I'm appreciative of all that I've heard today. I'm Pastor Bland from Liberty Temple Baptist Church in West Rockford, and I'm concerned about the fact that in the wake of every school, we have churches. And in our case, John R. King is one of those schools in our area, and we use some of our men to go and do safe passage and hall monitoring in the school. But I think in your position, it might be a good thing if we can have some kind of gathering to challenge our community leaders, pastors, et cetera, to use volunteer help of men and other persons in the congregation that can help those schools to be empowered. Before you leave, are you open to help to kind of make that thing happen? And there are many of us out there who will be glad to at least support that effort, because we're seeing a turnaround in the school when we see the local church involved in that kind of way, and we're watching some of this happening, but it doesn't get the press. And I'm even having an honor roll thing. That we're also looking to do a celebration of black males that graduate from high school this year, to try to be able to do that within that. So it just doesn't make Fox News all the time. So, but can you help by bringing some attention and the call for that things, because there's a church in every wake of every school in our city.
Yeah, definitely. We have a special outreach to the, through our public safety department, I know there's a special outreach. Absolutely, we will do that. And in particular, I want to applaud you for recognizing, black males who are graduating. Because if you go to many of the high school graduations, as I've done, there aren't that many black males coming across the stage. And when I am at a school early in the morning and I see men bringing their children to school, I always want to walk up to them and embrace them, because we need more men who are bringing their children to school and involved in their school. And I'm a little bit hypocritical when I say this, because it was my wife who was like president of the PTA, and I just went to the recitals. And when I had to get them to school, I got them my sons to school. But we definitely need more men involved in their children's lives, in particular at the schoolhouse level.
Good morning, Mr. Bobb. Here I am.
Oh, hi.
My name is Pansy Coleman. I'm with your Detroit Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, and I've met with you several times. I'm a question. Some of you don't know, Mr. Bobb was gracious enough to move our DTC West Transition Center and West and East Transition Center to a new facility to accommodate all the school programs. And for 6 years, parents were trying to get a new site. And in 1 year, he gave us a new site. Now, that was really great. Anything we've ever asked of him for special education, he has come through for us. Now, one question is this. DTC East had an auto body program, and we met at our meeting Tuesday. They're saying that an auto body program will not move to Drew Center because it cannot be accommodated. Now, the parents asked, could this program be held at one of the VOTEC centers? And from my understanding, that special education is not allowed there, special ed students are not allowed there. Now, we opened up VOTEC some years ago for special ed, years ago, and I'm surprised that the doors are closed now. So now, the auto body program the students are in now, they're in there. Now, when they move to Drew Center next week, they're not going to have a program. So what's going to happen to the students? So they're just asking. And I just have one more quick one, and this has been bothering me. I'm a resident, a longtime resident of Detroit, born and raised, and I'm a product of Detroit Public Schools. I'm a graduate of Cass Tech. And I wanted to know, when you came aboard, did our Detroit Board of Education try to work with you at all instead of trying to sue you? I'm interested to know, how much of my money did they spend suing you that could have went to our students? Now, so I just want to know, okay? And I'm through. Thank you.
I'm glad I attended because I was not aware of the automotive, but I will take that back today and see if we can get that issue resolved. Someone have to tell me why it cannot be done. And with respect to your last question, I think there's a little bit of blame for both of us.
All right. Well, let's give a round of applause for Robert Bobb. And just one more thing. You and I have not discussed this, but can we get you to commit to do an exit conversation here when you exit DPS?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
Back here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, University of Michigan-Dearborn, Daniel Little. Thank you all for coming.
We don't even need to say goodbye.